Hello, welcome to HighRoad U. We're delighted that you are taking your valuable time to join us. We welcome you to the scary episode, Top Issues in Email That Freak You Out, with Jenny Lassie from HighRoad Solution. If you're currently dialed into the telephone conference, remember this is a toll number, but if you have a voice over IP connection on your computer, please hang up and click Mic and Speakers under the audio panel on the right side of your screen. Supporting materials for today's presentation will be made available to print or download following today's webinar. Presenters encourage questions, so please ask when prompted by clicking the chat panel and typing in your question. Our content leaders will try and incorporate your questions during the session, but will address them during the Q&A portion at the end of the session. Please remember that HighRoad Solution is an authorized provider of CAE credits. You're only eligible to report this webinar for CAE credit if you attend live and for the entire session. Our session is eligible for 1 CAE credit. At this time, it is my pleasure to turn the program over to Jenny Lassie. Ms. Lassie, please begin.
Thank you, Jennifer. Hello, and welcome to Top Issues in Email Marketing That Freak You Out webinar. I'm your presenter, Jenny Lassie. And I have been affiliated with HighRoad Solution for 8 years, first as a client and then as an employee. I have experience handling deployments and deliverability for a wide range of clients with optimized recipient engagement top of mind. And so I routinely troubleshoot deliverability issues from ISP level filtering down to email client level filtering. I also consult with clients on authentication, content strategy, email preference center management, and other deliverability optimization tactics. But today, we're going to go over the top 13, that's right, 13 issues that freak out email marketers. So this is really a platform agnostic webinar, not specifically for the HighRoad Solution campaign email tool. But in addition to being basically the deliverability geek at HighRoad, I also answer the support phones as well as answer support tickets. And there are many recurring common support questions, but these top 13 always seem to have the most immediacy as well as a few exclamation points in the dialogue. And I say that nicely, but generally they're the hot topics. They are the most time sensitive, and they tend to freak people out to the point where their voices start to get a little bit high. Okay, but today's topic, we're going to talk about the freaky, the kind of freaky, shouldn't be freaky, and then go over any necessary resources. So to email or not to email, there is no try. That is the doggy Yoda talking. So number one, the top 13 issues that freak you out in email marketers for email marketers. Number one, I'm sending to all subscribers to invite them to our event and got the worst deliverability ever. OMG. There's some problems with this. Depending on the time of year you are trying to reach out to all subscribers in the system versus the normal segmentation you're used to, there are seasonal fluctuations in deliverability. So I've had this infographic before, but basically I created this just to represent the kind of cycles as far as the year goes, as far as the year in deliverability. So at the top is indicated with the red arrow, and that's indication of summer. Okay, so the warmer months, we seek or advise our clients to ask for permission to send, do any permission campaigning in the summer, because once you start to reach the fall or the orange arrow, that's really the time to segment and suppress, simply because ISPs are tightening up their inbox deliverability belt or algorithm in anticipation for the email volume coming for the holidays. That generally starts in late August, but mainly Q4 is the big culprit. This often tends to coincide with associations' end-of-year initiatives to increase membership and membership renewal. So in a lot of those cases, an email will begin to solicit membership renewal, and instead of sending to a segmented list, is going out to a broad base, and meaning it's going out to email addresses that are haven't been delivered to in a while. Okay, and so kind of churn and burn in the email marketing world is if you haven't emailed an email address in 6 months, we highly recommend not doing so without doing a few things first. But basically, to finish up this infographic here, as the fall goes into the winter, that's when we recommend going with A/B split testing to learn more about your constituents' behaviors and activities, and really learning from what they're doing versus what they're telling you they want to receive, simply because people can tell you what types of newsletters they want from your organization. If you actually see what they're clicking on and what content is resonating with them the most, that's going to tell you a lot about what you should be sending them in the future. And then as spring starts to come into play, then that's when we need to get really engaging and very exciting with the content, and in order to get them engaging in your emails. Okay, so improvement opportunities. Adjust the time period of your campaigns if you are sending to all subscribers. So there's obviously, if you're trying to reach out, cast the widest net at the time that deliverability is the most restrictive, you know, it's kind of an uphill battle. It's swimming upstream. There's going to be obstacles. There's going to be deliverability issues. So if you're okay with that, then, you know, keep on keeping on. But if you're not okay with that, then you really have to consider either being more segmented or changing the time of fiscal year you're actually doing these campaigns for, you know, for your email marketing planning for the following year. Okay. Also, run a full list through an email validation tool first to weed out any bad email addresses. So if you do not know if any of these email addresses, you're casting the widest net, there's a lot of email addresses that you might not be reaching to or that might not be in your normal email segmentation, run them through a list of validation tools just to see if they're still legitimate email addresses. It goes a long way. It's a little, there's a little cost associated with that, but you will definitely reap the rewards because you will find out before delivery if they're bad email addresses, and you can scrub them from the system. Okay. Also, you can send in batched deployments versus one big deployment. One of the things that I do find in Q4, this time of year you're casting the widest net, is that even if you're using message throttling, if you've heard of message throttling, basically in the schedule step of the message sending process, you can choose to throttle your message down to send only a certain amount of emails per hour if you have that enabled on your account. And so that might be, you know, you're sending to 200,000 subscribers, but maybe you want to throttle that down so the system is only sending 10,000 per hour for that, okay? Even if you're throttling, that is still, the ISPs are still seeing traffic. Even though the traffic is being throttled and not hitting them all at the same time, they're still seeing it's coming from the exact same email. So I would recommend breaking it up and sending, you know, in a few batch deployments, associating each one of those with the campaign, and then sending out. That way you can look at your aggregated statistics in the campaign level, but you're basically sending separate messages. They're hitting the ISPs at separate times, and the ISPs are seeing that it is separate messages. So even if it has a common subject line, still that has a tendency to be a little bit better in terms of deliverability. And also making sure, you know, I'll try not to be on my soapbox too much, but make sure your delivery configuration is up to snuff. So make sure that you're using DKIM or DKIM and sender ID, even DMARC. If you can use those authentication technologies, I highly recommend doing so. If you don't know if you are or not, just send an email to support@email or HighRoadSolution.com, and we'll make sure to tell you yes you do or no you don't. Okay. All right, topic number 2 that freaks you out. So I think my list is correct, and all the content in my email is correct, but having, you know, the send live message button gives a lot of people anxiety. What do you do? That tends to be, you know, as an email marketer, hitting that live send button, it's almost just kind of like you have to do some fist pumps and jump around, do some jumping jacks, and be like, hoo, 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 hoo. All right, I can do this, I can do this, even if you know everything is correct. But bottom line, how can you improve upon that anxiety? Relax. And I don't say this, lightly, but it is just email. At the end of the day, any subscriber receiving this email is not under the impression that no human makes no mistakes, basically. So it is just email. If there's something goes out wrong, if there's a typo, people understand. If there's if the segmentation is isn't right, then obviously they might have something to say about that. But just make sure your lists the correct lists are included when you are launching your email through the system. So if there is a mistake, you can use sent message metrics to segment out engaged subscribers and resend corrections. So basically, and see, I have a typo right there, but I'm not going to stress out about it because I'm human, and it should say resend, not resent. So when you get a copy of today's slides, I will make that correction because that's just the kind of OCD person I am. But and what I mean by engaged subscribers are people that have already opened your email, right? So if somebody hasn't opened it yet, or hasn't clicked through to any links in your email, maybe they haven't opened it yet. You might want to resend just something to somebody that's already opened it. If it makes sense, there's incorrect information or content in there, you can send a resend. I see it all the time from the big email marketers, even from Amazon. So it does happen. Okay. Also, you can verify your list prior to send by comparing your AMS data to your segmented data in your either your HighRoad account or whatever email tool that you use to launch email through to your constituents. So, and what I mean by that is that if you wanted to compare like the count, so you do a query inside of your AMS and you have a count of 1,500 people. And then you're looking at the segment or list inside the email tool, and there's a few less. Well, there's some things that account for that. Usually, any email tool is going to dedupe on email address. It will also scrub out any prior opt-outs, so it'll kind of whittle your list down. If there's a huge discrepancy, you can always export your list from your AMS and import into the email tool. But just verify your list count prior to send. Okay. I know our members put in their correct email address, but now they're invalid. Okay, well, this happens all the time, and there's a few different reasons for that, and this is email forensics is one of the things that we definitely go through this exercise a time or two. But how can you improve upon this? There's no such thing as a problem. There are always opportunities for improvement, right? So you can spot check the email address for obvious mistakes, right? So our system and mainly any other email platform is going to prevent you from importing in like malformed email addresses, like if it's not anything at anything.anything syntax. But if, for instance, your email address that's in there does follow that syntax, anything at anything.anything, but it's wrong, like Jenny at hotmail.com instead of hotmail.com. Like, our system isn't going to know until you attempt to deliver to that email address that it's really not a true or valid email address. The system will let it in because it's in the right syntax. So use the system's invalid syntax report during the import process. That is going to be very helpful for you to see if it's just happened to be input wrong, or if there was like a one character missing or something. Because people, when they do register for an event, or they're they're signing up for membership, they might enter in their email address wrong. So use the system's invalid syntax report to spot check for those instances. Now, that is not the full picture a lot of times. Sometimes the domain of the person, of the subscriber you're trying to send an email to, for some reason their email server is not letting in traffic from either your association's domain or the IP address associated with your email marketing platform. And those are things that you can only catch if you are routinely looking at the bounce logs for your sent messages. Now, bounce logs are something that, your email service provider doesn't get an email notification, whoop, whoop, so-and-so association can't send to this domain, problem, Will Rogers. That is not the case. So these are things that you need to be routinely looking at, and preferably every couple days, because addressing a lot of ISP issues that you might see in the bounce logs needs to be done for some ISPs within 48 hours of deployment. Otherwise, if you send an email to them, they'll disregard your request. Okay, so routinely look at the bounce logs. If you see an issue across the board for like a particular domain that's bouncing all of them, then you can send an email directly to them, do abuse at or a postmaster at the domain, and send basically an inquiry saying, we're trying to reach our constituents. We notice that you're not accepting our email. Please whitelist our IP address and our domain and allow those emails in. Now, initially, it's just servers talking to servers. You don't need to worry about it unless there is an issue. And then when there is an issue, you're reaching out to postmaster at and abuse at. There's real people behind that will make the appropriate changes to help you get in if, in fact, you are a legitimate email marketer sending legitimate email to their customers, basically. So, all right. So people are on the opt-out list that never went to our EPC or Email Preference Center. Okay, this happens. It happens a lot. And how that happens, how can you improve upon that problem? How can you improve or prevent that from happening? Basically, take a look at your unsubscribe mechanism, okay, or your global opt-out or your Email Preference Center. And in the body of your email, normally doesn't have any kind of links, either at the top of the email in the pre-header or in the message body, but it's in the footer. But if people have a hard time getting down, if your newsletter is particularly long and they're scrolling, they're trying to find a way to manage their preferences because they don't want this, sometimes it is just easier for them to click the spam button, okay? When they do hit the spam button, through the feedback loops that are in place with most email service providers, will automatically route them to the opt-out or global opt-out in the email platform to prevent you from sending email to people that reported you as a spammer. Okay, that's a safeguard. So people are not, they're skirting the system, basically. They're going around. They're doing the only thing that they, either that they have the option to do, or they just don't have the time to search for those links. So you have to make it as easy peasy as possible for them to find manage preferences or unsubscribe link in the email. So you can add it to the pre-header. If you have a big issue with people clicking the spam button, I highly recommend, this would be the first thing I would say, add an unsubscribe link in the pre-header. What is a pre-header? A pre-header is just that small text that is above the email body itself that, most people put in like a view online link, or having, trouble viewing this email, view it online. In that pre-header there, you can also say, no longer wish to receive this email, manage your preferences here. And so I do recommend doing that. Make sure there's an easy way to see manage preferences or unsubscribe. So, generally if it's a link, it's going to be in the default blue unless your template has it in a different color. Obviously, if the template has it in a different color and that different color for links is hard to see because of a background color or something along those lines, just make sure there's an easy way to see it. Visually proof it. Okay. If you have any questions, you can certainly run it by us or run it by anyone inside your organization saying, hey, would you know where to opt out if you were to see this? If they say no, then address it. Okay, and then always honor the unsubscribe when launching emails in the system. So I know a lot of organizations might send to all subscribers, and if they have an exclusion approach, they might forget by accident to exclude the exclusion list, basically. So, when launching an email in the system, or any system for that matter, always honor the unsubscribe if you have a way to do so. Okay. Now, this is an example of an opt-out export from one of our tools. And so you can see here that if you do an opt-out export, you can add additional fields to that export, so you're not just seeing the list of email addresses that is opted out, but you also have the ability to add the message ID. So that's basically the unique identifier for what message in our system was responsible for this opt-out. Also, the opt-out date. This is important because you might want to know if you're seeing like a bunch of opt-outs in a particular date range, you might want to, take some proactive measures against that happening again. The opt-out source being the most important. This is how the person opted out. If you see the stamp of complaint report, it's because they basically hit the spam button and reported you as a spammer. Okay, the feedback loops in place are automatically going to route them to your email service opt-out table in the database. Now, since they're skirting the system and not going through your email preference center, they might not be flagged appropriately or added to segments appropriately. Basically, they're taken out, first of all, out of your normal email marketing. But your EMS may not have been updated to the exclude from email flag or the do not contact by email flag, whatever is appropriate for your AMS. But they wouldn't be flagged in there unless you have a special reporting component on your integration. It's not a part of baseline, but it is something that we can take any opt-outs from your email account and make sure that they're mirrored on a daily basis in your AMS. So if that's something you're interested in, let us know. Reach out to your project manager or send an email to support, and we'll make sure that the ball starts rolling. Okay. I wanted to show you this because there is also, and I'll just go back here, if you can see a list unsubscribe stamp here in the opt-out source, that I think confuses a lot of people because they don't know what that is, right? And so I'm just going to show you an example of Gmail. Now, Gmail has its own, first this screenshot here shows you that it's very easy to report it as spam. So say I get this email from CrowdCut, and I didn't sign up for CrowdCut, so why are they sending it to me? First of all, I can report this as spam, as indicated by the arrow. But Gmail also has its own unsubscribe mechanism that it will automatically add to emails regardless of your input, and it will automatically add it to any emails that have some characteristics that they determine to be spam-like, okay, or flagged as this could potentially be unsolicited email. Okay, now you can see that a little bit lower down, but just so you can see it right here, that is the Gmail unsubscribe mechanism. Okay, now this is still using feedback loops to add people to the global opt-out. It is skirting the system. They are not going to the email preference center. They are not being flagged in your AMS, but you will see them in your opt-out export as a list unsubscribe. Hotmail has this type of technology too. A lot of web-based email clients do. It is not automatically on every single email that you would ever send to Gmail subscribers, only the emails that Gmail has determined to have spam-like characteristics, okay? Either the graphic to text ratio. I've done some testing. I can't come up with anything conclusive to say, okay, your text ratio is 71% text to 29% graphic. I haven't come up with anything like that. It tends to be a little random, but just know that if somebody happens to click the unsubscribe there, they will be added to your global opt-out list. Now, it doesn't ding you like a spam complaint does, okay? So it doesn't, it's a way for Gmail to let their customers opt out of your communications, whether you want them to or not. So I know that if they're members and, via their membership, they're required to receive certain email communications from you. You cannot force someone to get something they don't want, no matter how much you try. Okay. Now, even if they're on the unsubscribe list, you can still send them transactional email if there's a true transaction, meaning they purchased something from you or registered for a webinar and you're using a transactional platform. That will send an email to them because the transactional platform isn't reliant on this opt-out list. But if you're sending normal standard live messages through the system to those, even if you consider them transactional in nature, but they're not through a transactional platform, you just need to watch out for that. So ask us if you have any questions. Okay. This is a huge one. We get this all the time in support. So basically, why did my email say Dear Olson when the first name was Robert? Grr. Okay, and not specifically, all the first names are Robert, but basically the personalization is incorrect in an email that was sent out. If you're an integrated customer of ours, those first name and last name fields are automatically brought over via your integration. But if you do any manual imports and incorrectly map names, this can happen. And not just, it can happen as well if you have an import file in CSV format that any values inside of any columns in your CSV file have commas in them, and you're importing in a CSV file that has commas in them, any system, any data system will flip the cell. Okay, so how can you improve upon this and make sure that you never send out another email with incorrect, basically names that are used for personalization? Well, you could let your integration automatically populate those first and last names. That is done systematically and, generally does not have any issues with it. It's 99.99% of the time, it's always a manual import that was imported in between the time that your integration ran last and the email that you're sending, it was incorrect. So first, you can map first name and last name correctly, but spot check several records before you actually deploy the email. That's always a smart thing to do. So if you're doing a manual import, just go look at a few records and see if the first name is truly the first name and the last name is from the last name. Pick the test records, spot check from the beginning of your list, the middle of your list, and also the end of your list, because if there were any commas and any values in there and it does flip the cell, you might see that towards the end of your list they start becoming wrong. In the middle of the list it was okay, so that would tell you kind of that something happened during the import, somewhere between the middle and the end of your CSV file, the last few rows that may have flipped the cell and caused the incorrect mapping. So that is the first thing. The first thing that we would do is ask you for that source file that was imported into the system so we could review it. 9.9 times out of 10, it's because there was a comma somewhere. Like maybe there was a title column in there that had like a president, comma, owner, right? So you just want to make sure that you're cognizant of that. If you're importing multiple columns, just save it as a text file versus CSV in case any cell values have a comma in them. So that's just a kind of a safeguard. Because a text file it's a tab delimited versus comma delimited. Obviously, if it's comma delimited and it's a comma separated values file, there's obviously conflict with that. So just beware. Also, make sure your email message body is using the correct tag. So if you're using the personalization icon in the editor when you're crafting your message, it will automatically add the correct tag, which is %% first, % for first name, for instance. If you were using maybe a different, like the % name, %, and that's the system's tag for merging first name and last name, but maybe the mapping was off and so it looks funny. There's a few things that could be behind or at the root of the issue. In general, it's almost always an import file that was manually imported in, mapping incorrectly, but obviously let us know if you don't feel that that's the case. Okay. And a little break from all the scariness, but here's a little dog on an iPhone. I just thought that was kind of cute, so I added that in here. But it does segue nicely into the next freaky issue, and that is, ugh, my responsive template isn't being responsive. This is huge. A lot of customers and associations, email marketers are all, doing the best practices and now realizing that mobile, mobile's big. It's here. It's now. All emails that are sent from the system should, in theory, be mobile friendly. So you may have had an outside design firm do a responsive template. But you notice when you're sending an email through the system that it's not being responsive. The columns aren't stacking. The images aren't reducing in size. It looks funky on your iPhone. Well, there's a few things that could be behind that. So what are the improvement opportunities with that? Okay, so you could proof the original HTML code, and if you're not a coder, you can. I know enough to make myself dangerous, but I certainly couldn't code an HTML template by hand or scratch. But there is a few things that you can spot check. They're not that scary to see if the tags are in the proper and correct order. Okay. If you are importing a responsive template, responsive coding, there are best practices, but depending on, if you're having like a tool do it, like an inliner tool or another third-party provider that maybe isn't necessarily an expert at responsive templates, or they're using an inliner themselves that's adding code in crazy places, there's just a few things to note with that. But always use the correct workflow process when adding your content to a template. Any template, really. This is across the board. If you are using a template or a pre-formatted look and feel for your email, you never want to first delete the placeholder content and then add your content from, either the I would generally steer away from using any of the paste icons in the editor at all. And that's for a reason. Because depending on what option you're choosing, if you are using a template, it's basically adding tags in the back end. If you want to avoid formatting issues, always first take your content, no matter what application you're getting it from, Word, Skype, Excel, a chat window, I don't care what application, but always paste it into Notepad first. Notepad is going to strip out any formatting that's in the back end and strip it down to plain text, okay? From Notepad, then highlight, okay, Control C to copy, and then put your cursor just before the placeholder content in there. So if it's Greek or lorem ipsum, or this is placeholder text, put your cursor just before the first letter of that placeholder text, and then hit Control V in your, with your keyboard to paste your content in from Notepad directly into the template. Then, and only then, highlight the placeholder text and hit delete. If you're highlighting the placeholder text first and deleting it, you're deleting everything in the back end of the HTML. So if there were what are called @media queries to say, I want this text to stack over this text for mobile, okay? If you delete that placeholder text, you're deleting everything in the back end, including the responsiveness that's making it look good on mobile. You're deleting that and then adding in content that does not have the responsive code in the back end. So always use that workflow process. And if you are using an outside developer, our design team already knows to do this. We would never install templates inside your account that don't follow this order. But basically, if you see you add a template from an outside developer, and then when you look in the editor, you look at the source code and you see, all the styles got stripped out from my template. What happened? In general, it's because the correct tag order was not followed. So basically, and you'll have access to the slide too after the webinar, but HTML, the open HTML tag, the open head tag, the title tags, both the open and close, and then the style tags, and then the meta tag. A lot of standard web design for web pages will have the meta tag higher in here, but for responsive templates to work, in general, it's just better to put that meta tag after the closing style tag, okay? And then the closing head tag, and then the message body. Okay, so that's the correct order. If this correct order is not followed and you notice that the editor is stripping the styles, that's why. It's mostly because maybe your original HTML code had the meta tag in the wrong area. Okay? All right. So the correct workflow process when you go to create and send an responsive email is you go to Messages, Create Message. You pull in your responsive template, you paste all text into Notepad first, highlight and then copy, put your cursor before the placeholder text, then hit Control-V to paste the Notepad content directly into the template. Yes, this does mean that you'll need to recreate your links. Okay? You can certainly paste from a Word document directly into using the paste from Word icon in there, but you would never want to do that in conjunction with the template. When you're using a template, whether it be a standard template or responsive template, you need to follow this workflow process. Okay, and then hit Control-V to paste in Notepad content. You can recreate your links. Then you can highlight, delete your placeholder text. Okay. All right. Now that I've beaten that dead horse, here is a police dog and a jail dog. So I don't know who edited that sent message. Sheesh. You know, that is really common. People are not understanding, well, this isn't what I did, and they automatically assume that, you know, the system magically changed their content from something that they did to something somebody else did. But there's tools inside the account that show you exactly what happened, who did what inside the system. So you will see in your user activity log, if you are either a campaign manager or a sysadmin account, you can see, go under the administration tab and see the user activity log. This is going to show you exactly who did what, who sent what, who touched what draft inside the system, and what day and time they did that. Okay, so all that information is available. If you do not have access to the user activity log, chances are maybe your account is set up as a sub-account. And if that's the case, then you can certainly call our support line or email support at HighRoad if you're a HighRoad customer, and we can just tell you exactly what happened. We'll look at the user activity log as we can log into your account as the admin. Okay. So I am traveling and I don't see the full navigation bar. Well, there are the security protocol inside your email account exists for a reason, and I know sometimes it's really a pain in the butt, especially when traveling, especially for our global users that are going to China, you know, but they still need to send out an email message, okay? Well, there are a few different things that you can do, but from a data security perspective, we take data security very seriously. And I know that you're not, you know, sending out, you know, credit card numbers or anything, but this is your data, right? If anyone were to inadvertently get a hold of your data, it would be a big issue for you. So we try to protect you, you know, no matter how much of a pain in the butt that can be sometimes, but we're going to protect you from that as much as we can. So basically, anytime you're logging into the system, it's tracking the IP address of your login attempt, okay? Not the IP address of the device you're logging in from, like your Mac laptop. It's actually looking at the IP address of your location of your network, basically, okay? So if you are using your same username and password today from your office, but say then you go home and you've never logged in from home before, you are calling in from a different location or IP address, okay? Most of the time, it allows you to answer your security questions and get into your account just fine. But if that network location is under suspect for any reason, the system may temporarily give you restricted access to your account, meaning you might only see the dashboard and reporting and something else. You won't see all of the tabs, like you won't see the messages tab because it won't let you actually send an email. It won't let you have access to the subscriber tab to look up email addresses or have access to the data. It's all in the interest of protecting your membership and your email database. Okay, so if you are traveling, you can certainly set up a new user account. Don't access that account, but once you are at your destination, log into that account, and it will whitelist your location the first time you're logging in from that location. Now, if you're staying at a hotel, hotel networks will always be rotating IPs. So if you access this system, it's going to have one IP address associated with that location. If you then, go to a meeting, you come back to your hotel room and you try to use the internet again, it's going to have a different IP address. So when you're traveling, it can be a little bit of a bugger to do what you need to do if you're constantly getting slapped with a rotating IP address that is preventing you from using the system. When that's the case, we can either stay logged in to that internet session without logging out and then starting a new internet session. Stay in that session because it should just keep your IP address for as long as you are active in that session. If you log out and log back in, that's generally when you have problems accessing your account. Okay. If you are using a hotspot, or basically a mobile wireless network, okay, using your iPad or your iPhone, that also will be rotating IP addresses from the network, from the 4G network. So if you're using that, just know that, basically the system is, the way the system sees it is pretend you're in a train, right? And you're going in the train and you're going through all these different locations, but you're still staying logged in. So it's constantly seeing a new location associated with your session, and it's going to bump you out. This is also the case, too, if your association has a basically rotating IPs to balance the traffic or balance the internet traffic on your network, basically. And then you keep getting kicked out of the system. This is the same thing behind that. So if the IP address associated with your location is changing either every single time you log in or even in mid-session, if it's happening in mid-session where you're going, your location is from one IP address to the next, you'll see that you're bumped back to the login screen. Okay, if that's happening, there are options that your network can do to create basically a static route to your Blue Hornet account or HighRoad account in order to prevent that from happening. But there's a few steps that your IT staff would need to go through to make that happen. But there are options. If you're experiencing that, that's why there is a fix. But it just reach out to us and let us know, and we'll be happy to work with your team. Okay. If you don't know what your IP address is, the site whatismyip.com will give you the IP address of your current location. And then you can call or email HighRoad support, and we can whitelist that IP address that you give us with your username. So if that happens, we need the IP address from your location as well as the username you use to access the system. That is the only way that we're able to get you back into your account. Okay? Okay. So basically, if you're logged into the same account simultaneously from two different IP addresses, you're going to go to doggy jail. You are. There's just no way around it. So just reach out to our support department. We'll be happy to help resolve the issue. It might mean you sign off from one particular, your iPad 4G network and only go through your wireless, and we will whitelist your wireless IP location. Okay. Here's another pain point, another common support ticket item that infuriates people a lot of times. So I set up a user account and they can't log in. Ew. Okay, so when you are setting up a user account or new account, the system automatically will send an email notification to that new user account or whatever email address is associated with that user account. Okay? That will have a link to the login screen. It will have their username, and it will have the password that you originally set up, but that password is temporary. It expires in 24 hours. And in the user account setup, when a new user account is set up for you or your password is changed, you will get an email notification with that temporary password. Do not copy and paste the password from the email notification. And that's for security reasons. So if you have that temporary password email notification, first paste that password into Notepad. Okay? And what you will see when you do that is that the email notification has basically a blank space character at the end of that password. So if you're copying and pasting that into the login screen and getting a login attempt failed, it's because there's a blank character after the string of characters that you visually see for your password. So make sure that you're pasting it into Notepad, or just type it directly in. If it's not like some long, complicated thing, just type it directly in. Make sure that any passwords are case sensitive. Make sure that you're using any capital letters where applicable. Okay, now here's a big one. And there's a million different things that could be at the root of this issue. But no one is opening or clicking on my email. What gives? Okay, it's hard to say not no one. So there's a few places that we start. My first question as a deliverability geek is, well, it's really hard for people to click and open an email if they don't know it's there, right? So are you sure that your delivered emails are reaching inboxes? Because if they're getting routed to spam, how many times do you look at your spam folder? I know maybe I check mine once a day, and that's just because I want to make sure I'm not letting legitimate emails slip through to that, especially any emails coming from clients. But if I didn't have that to worry about, I'd probably never check it. I barely ever check my Gmail spam folder. I just don't. I don't have time. I have 10,000 emails in my inbox. I don't have time to check the spam folder too. So basically there's a few things that you can do to make sure that you are optimizing your chances of inbox delivery, and that is obviously making sure that your config is up to date, that you're using authentication, so DKIM, sender ID, or DMARC authentication. That's basically a digital signature that is giving the email platform permission to send on behalf of your domain, right? This is the first thing most ISPs look for. It's not just a nice to have, it's an absolute must have now in order to reach somebody's inbox, okay? Because there's filters in place with every recipient email server that is first looking to see if your email looks like phishing. Any email that does not use authentication, chances are it's getting quarantined or filtered, okay? So and you might see, like if we did an inbox placement report using our return path tool, this might just look like it's going missing, right? Because it's not reaching an inbox, it's not reaching a spam box, but yet it's delivered because our system is able to deliver the message to the email server. But once that email server closes the door, okay, I'll let in your email, and then they close the door, we don't have any insight of where it's routing that email. Okay, the system just doesn't. So our system says delivered because it delivered the email. Whether or not it got routed to an inbox, a spam folder, or a quarantine, we don't know that. So the chances are greater if you have authentication that you will bypass those quarantines. Okay. Also take a look. Is your email mostly graphics? That is huge. First of all, if the message is mostly graphics and most people are reading your email in a preview pane where graphics are disabled by default, and there's no content for them to read, like no text because all of your text is in a graphic, people aren't going to get the message. I delete those all the time. I'm like, if you don't have the time to put together an email where at least some of the text is using in an alt tag or something for an image, then I'm not going to click through. You're making me do too many steps to get your to get the email. And if it's not something that I'm looking for or waiting for or, anticipating to receive, then I'm just going to delete it, or I'm just not going to interact with it at all. I'll just let it sit in my inbox. So if your email is mostly graphics, I do recommend having as much as you can be HTML and minimizing the use of graphics, meaning like you don't want your whole body of your email to be one big graphic. It's just, it's a quick way of getting something out, yes. Is your time precious? Yes. But if nobody's opening your email, then it's time to put a little bit more time and energy into your email for optimizing the deliverability of it. So if it has a lot of graphics, just make sure in the alt tag for those graphics, like when you insert an image, there's a little field in there for alt text. If you put in what text you want that in, like say the graphic says, registered now for our 2014 event, okay? Well, the alt text for that graphic can say the exact same thing. So when people are looking at that email in their preview pane and only see those little red X's where images exist, they'll see that text in there, and they'll know what basically that image is, and they could potentially then prompt them to download the graphics and click on it, or just click on it. So that's one thing that could be improved upon. Also, is the call to action obvious? So if I was reviewing some messages in the last couple of days, and first of all, there was not one link in the entire email, and it was a renewal message to renew your membership. Well, how on earth is someone going to renew if there's no link in the email? Would be my first question. Let's think about it in kind of common layman's, let's point out the obvious. But, so not only was the whole email text, but there was no call to action. There was no renew now button, or there was no here's what you get, and renew now to take advantage of that, and then have a renew. Not even a text link to renew now. That is a big area of improvement. So just putting that out there. Also, what story do the bounce logs tell you? And so, look at your sent message. Take a look at the bounce logs to see what's going on. Was there maybe a system timeout because one of the domains you were emailing, maybe their DNS wasn't working and we couldn't even look them up. Maybe their email server was down and it bounced all traffic. I mean, there's a lot of possible reasons that things bounce. So take a look at the bounce logs and see if maybe that might explain why you didn't get a lot of opens and clicks. Also, if you're seeing a lot of spam complaints, that's a big issue too. Because spam complaints, ISPs do take notice of that, and they will begin to time out any future. So Yahoo is famous for this, right? They'll let in like, whatever their threshold is on that day. They might let in 250 emails, and if too many people hit the spam complaint button, it will defer all the other traffic, and it won't even answer the door. So we're trying to deliver. We're like, knock, knock, knock. Yahoo, please let us in. Knock, knock, please let us in. They're not even answering the door. After 48 hours of our system continually attempting to try to deliver that message, it just times out and stops trying, okay? And that's because of basically the complaint threshold for the ISP. So if you see that some are getting through, but then afterwards the rest of them are timing out, it's because of usually 99% of the time is part of the complaint threshold has been met, okay? Sending in smaller batches would potentially alleviate some of this versus sending in one large deployment. So I know that's more work, but when it comes to deliverability, sometimes you got to do what you got to do. Okay. It didn't deploy, but I didn't know it wasn't sent. Eek! Okay. This is common. This is common. If you scheduled a message and it didn't deploy, but, I mean, there's no email notification that gets sent to you. The only way that you would know it didn't send is if you log into the system to look at your reporting metrics, right? So troubleshooting 101. Was it a live message and you hit send now? If so, was there a subscriber count for the included segment? So a lot of times when you send an email, if it went to a segment that had 0 subscribers in it, the system can't send to 0 subscribers, so it'll route that back to your drafts folder because it can't actually send the message. Another possible thing is if you are also excluding an exclusion segment, but that basically wipes out the count of anyone that you may have included, and so therefore the system can't send to 0 subscribers, so it will route that back to drafts. And if it was this is a big one too, if it was a message that was scheduled to deploy in the future, okay? But if any person touched that email that was scheduled to send, okay, if they touched it, if they just went into edit scheduled messages and they clicked on it to just look at it, like, oh, what email is this? Let me take a peek at it. Anytime someone touches a scheduled message, it will tell you, but you may not have actually picked up on this because it's only in blue text with the big I in there that says scheduled message is now a draft and will not be sent unless a new schedule is saved. So anyone that happened to touch that would need to go all the way to the end of the process in order to reschedule that message. How can you tell? Well, you can take a look at the user activity log, again, under the administration, and look at user activity log and see, okay, well, a message was created and then scheduled, but then somebody after, by this username, edited that message and then did nothing with it. So you can see with the user activity log exactly who touched it, who might have taken it out of scheduled mode, okay? Okay. My email sent had the wrong image. Okay. Well, there's a few things about image paths. An image path is the URL to that image on the server that hosts the graphic. So if you're using the your email system to host the graphic, or if you have graphics hosted on your server on your website, either way, if you import an image, the system uses that name in the image path, or in the path to that image. So if you delete that image and import a new image of the same size with the same name, the path would be the same and therefore served in the sent email. So this is just kind of a workaround if you happen to use the wrong image in your email. If you don't know what your image path is, you could certainly just go to Assets and Create Template and pull, use the Insert Image icon to insert that image, and then just toggle the source button to then see what that source is. Okay, then you can see there that that's the full URL to that email, and the image file name is the last, basically after that last slash. Okay. If your sent email had the wrong link, most people know that you can change a link after the fact. Link bad, fire bad. You can change a link after the email has been sent by going to Reports, Sent Messages, select the email and hit the Edit button, or overwrite the new link basically over the old link and hit Save. Then anyone who hasn't opened the message yet will be served the correct link. Some people that have already opened the message can also, if they go back to that email and click on the link again, will be served the correct. It depends on if the email client is actually caching anything about that email. Some email clients cache the links. So how do you do that? You just go to Report Sent Messages, choose your message, and hit the Edit button. And that will show you the Manage and Track links. You simply overwrite the correct URL over the incorrect URL and hit Save. It's that easy. Okay. And just some finishing up items here. If you're feeling moody, perhaps you suffer from EMS or email marketing syndrome. So basically, if you are going against the grain, if you will, or this cycle of email marketing when it comes to the programs you're trying to initiate depending on the season, and if that's going against the easy way to deliver emails, you might have some issues if you're swimming upstream. So if you're swimming, going up a creek without a paddle, we can certainly help you and advise you, but we can't fix the issue if it's not fixable. So just reach out to us. We do have a lot of help for you. We've expanded our already large pool of resources with content developers who work with you to craft your campaigns with optimal engagement. So just reach out to sales at HighRoad Solutions. So we have content developers, we have design team, anything that you might need for email marketing, we're there to help. So Okay. Long-winded, and I think I didn't leave a ton of time for Q&A, so I'd be happy to answer any questions, and we can have that in the follow-up email. But thank you for participating in the top issues in email marketing that freak you out. Did I miss anything freaky? QA time. So, and just be sure to look for an email featuring a recording of today's webinar as well. Well, recording of today's webinar is available on demand at the HighRoad U for any registrants and attendees. And a copy of the presentation slides will be available in the follow-up email. Okay. Thank you very much. And Jennifer, are there any questions that I can answer, or did I address them all?
I think you addressed everything. We haven't received any questions, but as a reminder, just type them into the chat panel on the right side of your screen.
All right. Well, it is the top of the hour here, and I thank everyone for attending. And if you have any questions, just here's my contact information and Twitter handle. Feel free to reach out.
Thank you for joining us at the U for the scary episode, Top Issues in Email That Freak You Out, with Jenny Lassie from HighRoad Solution. This concludes today's program. Have a great day, and you may now disconnect.